Kia ora and welcome to another Physiotherapy Board Te Poari Tiaki Tinana podcast. This episode is the audio version of our recent webinar on the new Code of Ethics and Professional Conduct and features Board Te Poari Chief Professional Advisor Damon Newrick in conversation with Professor Lynley Anderson, who specialises in bioethics in healthcare education and was the lead author for the review of the code. They discuss the changes to the code, the context for these changes, and ways practitioners can ensure their practice meets its requirements. The webinar was recorded on Thursday the 19th of March 2026.
Kia hora te marino, kia whakapapa po ngā mū te moana. He hurahi mā tātou I te rangi nei. Aroha atu aroha mai, tātou I a tātou katoa. Haumi e, hui e, tai e. Kia ora and welcome. My name's Damon. I'm one of the professional advisors here at the Physiotherapy Board at Te Poari. I'm joined today and privileged to be joined by Professor Lynley Anderson. Lynley is a physiotherapist and academic and a professor at the University of Otago, specialising in bioethics and healthcare, education in sports and sports healthcare provision. We have been privileged to have Professor Anderson with us again on this latest review of the Code of Ethics. And she joins us today to discuss the code, what it means for physiotherapy practice in Aotearoa, New Zealand in these contemporary times and some of the changes. So kia ora and welcome, Professor Anderson.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Nice to be here and thank you very much, Damon. Just a little correction. I am now Professor Emerita, which means I have left, I'm still connected with the university, but I have retired from my most of my day job.
Well, congratulations on that. It's fantastic. As we do with a lot of our guests, I think you've had a really interesting journey through physiotherapy. So to begin with, what's your physiotherapy journey look like to get you to where you are today?
Oh, thank you, Damon. I graduated a long time ago, in 1982, I think, and I worked in hospitals and private practice for maybe 7 years. And I was a little bit troubled by some of the things I witnessed as a team member. And it prompted me to go back to university, and I've kind of followed my nose, did some kinesiology, did some, all sorts of different things, and ended up in medical ethics, which is a course at Otago. And I did a master's and PhD and ended up getting a job at the Bioethics Centre and eventually I was head of department and also I was acting dean of the medical school, which is Dunedin part of the medical school. And so I never lost my love and fondness for physiotherapy and always have tried to contribute where possible and where asked. And so that's my physiotherapy journey. And it kind of shows you that you never lose anything you learn. It's always relevant.
Yeah, it's fantastic to see where physiotherapists start and end up, and I think that's one of the really interesting parts of my job, is seeing where people end up. This is not your first review of this code, is it? So you've been involved in this a number of times. Yes,
in fact, it's this is I think my fourth different code, not of the physiotherapy one. I've done a couple or three iterations of the physio. This is the third one. The first one was very extensive, where we carried out research with special interest groups and found out what people really, what clinical practice actually was like in all those different clinical groupings. And I've also written one for the Australasian College of Sport and Exercise Physicians, and doing similar kind of research prior to that, and then the reiteration of that, and also the Medical Student Code of Conduct it's for all medical students in the entire country. So, yeah, there's a variation there.
Fantastic. We know, and we've discussed before, that this makes up, the Code of Ethics and Professional Conduct makes up one of the main parts of the physiotherapy standards framework alongside the standards themselves and the practice thresholds. For those maybe who are new to practice or those who are coming back to the Code of Ethics, what is a Code of Ethics and why is it important to our profession?
Okay, a Code of Ethics is very important, and one of the reasons why is it's a mark of a profession. So when you look across our professional colleagues right across healthcare, you will see all of them have a Code of Ethics. We're talking medicine, nursing, dentistry, pharmacy, etc. They'll all have their own Code of Ethics, and it's actually a requirement under the Health Practitioners Competency Assurance Act, I think. So and so why do we have it? Well, there's a lot of good reasons for having a code of conduct or code of ethics, and those include it's a place to establish our values and to voice our values, and it's also a place where our professional community can sort of coalesce around this document. So it shares our values, and then it's also got some particularly useful categories and components to it. So if there was ever a complaint about a physiotherapist to the Health and Disability Commissioner, the Health and Disability Commissioner would say, well, what is expected of physiotherapists across Aotearoa, New Zealand? And they would go to probably our professional standards, and they would also go to our Code of Ethics to see what it states. And that's the thing that we are measured by as physiotherapists. So Right 4 in the Code of Health and Disability Services Consumers' Rights document actually says that this health practitioner will be held to standards, and that will include professional standards and ethical standards. And this is where those ethical standards are stated. It's also a source of trust. So if a member of the public, and remember, the code should be accessible to the members of the public at any time, so it should be front-facing, and so that the patients can go and look at, or karataki, as we'll get onto later as a term, will go to the document and be able to see what's important to us and how does that fit with my values and so on. So that's another really important thing. And the other thing that I wanted to mention is that a code of ethics can also be a shield. Now, what I mean by that is that if you are asked to do unethical practices or activities by either an employer or a patient karataki, or then you can say, or even, for example, a coach in a sports team asks you to do something you know jolly well wouldn't go well with your colleagues and is not an acceptable thing to do, and yet they're asking you to do it. You can hold up your code of ethics and say, actually, I can't do this, and this is why. So it helps to be used as a form of sort of a shield from unethical expectations of people.
Thanks, Lily. And that's something which I think the professional advisors talk about here with practitioners often is that feel free to use the code and the board, Te Poari, as I'm really sorry, but I can't. It's a really, really useful tool, and there's a particular new principle which is in there which is actually very helpful for those who are starting employment. So we'll come to that soon anyway. I hear on a reasonably regular basis, and I don't think it's a terrible thing, that a lot of people are like, well, but I read the Code of Ethics, and most of it's just like common sense, which is lovely, in many ways.
Yes, I'd like to comment on that. And if this code is common sense to you, then great. I think your clinical practice is going to be, terrific. It's always a good thing to have up our sleeve, and I don't think common sense is necessarily as common as we would hope, and that's fine. And I also think that people coming to physiotherapy from different components and places of employment and so on may have different views, and so this is a good place to place this, to have this to be able to rely on and know that our clinical practice is appropriate.
So Is there a difference between, this is the other question we get, is there a difference between what is legal and what is ethical? And
yes,
we've discussed this many times.
Yes, I love this question. So, in fact, I asked my lawyer husband, we were possibly going to be talking about what's the difference between legal and ethical. And he said, oh, well, the law is just there for those people who don't have ethics. And I thought that was quite funny. But in actual fact, the law actually expresses the minimal standard. And we are hoping everybody is practicing to a much higher standard than that. There are some things that are legal and some things that are, not ethical. So it might be legal to have a extramarital affair. It might be legal to lie to your ailing grandmother and tell her things, reasons why you didn't keep the meeting agreement you had arranged and she was left. And so to lie to your grandmother or to have an extramarital affair is not illegal, but lots of people would think that was an unacceptable thing to do, and perhaps they would call it unethical. So there are different standards. So we would hope that people, sort of comply with ethical expectations. And if you are aiming for the ethical standard, you are probably going to be hovering way above the bottom line, the sort of barest minimum. Do you know what I mean? So this is kind of a safe area of practice. Yeah. Hopefully that answers your question, Damon.
It certainly does. It certainly does. I remember coming back from overseas. I moved back in 2019 and things had changed, and we had the physiotherapy standards framework, which had been in place for a year when I got back. So why do we update codes? I mean, if it's something, 2018 doesn't seem like that long ago, Lynley, to me. Neither does the year 2000, though. So why do we change codes? Do things change that much?
Yes, well, yes and no. Some of our core values will never change. Our commitment to patients or kiritaki, our commitments to the profession, our responsibilities to patient whānau, our responsibilities to our colleagues and to ourselves and to our, the people we work with down the corridor, they will always remain. But clinical practice changes. And if you can think of one of the stark differences or the big thing that happened between 2018 and now is, of course, COVID. And what happened to physiotherapy during COVID? Well, a lot of it went online. Some of it went online, but a lot of it, clinical practices evolved, technologies evolve, sort of ways of doing things and research evolves. And so we find, well, it's actually better to do X instead of Y, and it does change some of our ways we might approach things. And these new areas, some people, we possibly need some guidance in them in some of those new areas. And a code should always be a living document. I remember some of the first codes that I read didn't have a lot of te reo in them, didn't have a lot of sort of acknowledgement of, sort of our relationship through the treaty and so on. And so, these things evolve, and I think that's great.
Yeah, the other area we talked about with the working group was, of course, physiotherapists have also ended up in some very different places to where they were in 2018. As you said, whether it's telehealth or there's an ever-evolving list of areas where physiotherapists end up. And taking account of that, or also taking into account where people may get stuck if we keep the code the same and we entrap people in that, is also one of the reasons that I think we look to do this on a regular, really reasonably regular basis.
Yeah. Yes, I couldn't agree more. The places we end up can be markedly different, and I would include some of the sporting areas, and all sorts of different areas we might end up that we weren't before.
So what advice would you give to physiotherapists who are maybe starting out their career, or those who are maybe coming to the Code of Ethics for the first time or returning? Where do you start in reviewing these things? They're big documents.
It is a big document. I would try and read the entire document. I think that's probably a good start. And if you've read the entire document, you tend to get a flavour of what is expected of you as a clinician, a new clinician, and it will express your values, and it will lay down expectations of you as a clinician. And so I would try and read the whole thing. That would be my go-to point at this stage. Can I make a comment about what I think you should do as a clinician, a new clinician?
Absolutely, you can.
And that would be get yourself some support as you go into this. And I don't mean sort of non-clinical people primarily. I mean, get yourself some professional sort of peer group work going on so that you can get any support that you need, that you stay connected professionally and emotionally and personally. And I would also say that one of my old colleagues used to talk about isolation equals distortion. So if we become professionally isolated or personally isolated or emotionally isolated, we can start to kind of deviate from what's expected of us. And so if I was starting out as a physiotherapist now, that would be one of the first things I would do. And it might be some of the people you went through physiotherapy school with. It might be some people in your local community. I mean, physios or, sort of other health professionals in your local community if it's a small community. And make sure you meet on a regular basis. It's no good if a crisis occurs, an ethical or a professional issue occurs for you. It's too late to establish it then. I mean, well, it's not impossible, but it's so much better to have it established already. Get that support wrapped around you so that you can deal with issues as they might arise.
I think as we've both been around for a wee while, that I think we do find that it doesn't matter how hard you try to avoid, you're going to have challenges like, to these things across your career. And I agree with you. I think having that support ready beforehand is extremely helpful. And we often say here that these things don't often just jump up in front of you. Sometimes that's a really slow burn situation that's happening, and you find yourself, 6 months, 3 months down the track, actually, I'm not quite sure I'm doing the right thing here. So we talk about autonomous practice in Aotearoa New Zealand a lot, as we do across the globe. That means it doesn't mean we have to deal with it all on our own, right? It's about having supports around you and having others who you can have those discussions with, and as you said, who can challenge you and avoid that professional isolation.
Yes, and a couple of points I want to make on that. Yes, autonomous practice doesn't mean you do everything by yourself. What it means is that you are able to practice independently of, necessarily you can take on your own referrals, but also, what was I going to say? That if there is something that you've established this wonderful group, or you've got a mentor, or you've got a clinical supervisor, and I don't mean that in the true clinical sense of the word, but, somebody who you can take issues to. If there is something you don't want to take to your little peer group or to your mentor, that's a sign you've got to take it to the peer group or the mentor. That's a sign that you are, perhaps, sort of hiding things away. And that's a really bad sort of step to start to take. So please try and share, in particular, if you don't want to share.
But I think a really good sign to look out for, isn't it? It's the situation you don't want to take. We're comfortable talking about the things we're comfortable with.
Yes. Yeah.
And And also, I'd say to people out there too, if you do have any questions about it as you are going through, if you find yourself in a situation and did want to talk about it, there are other avenues. You can contact the board and have a chat with one of the professional advisors as well. So, yeah, there are options out there. But I think, Lynley, your advice of having the group set up or having those supports in place early rather than when something strikes is a really important part of being a physiotherapist.
Yeah. Can I just also say one thing? Make sure you scribble down some notes after those meetings about the things that that you talked about for you. So that just in case something comes to the attention of either the Health and Disability Commissioner or and you've actually sought some support about this, it does tend to go. So it's being looked on favourably is what I'm saying. So it's a good idea to do that.
Yeah, I would absolutely echo that. And I would say that's where I like the physiotherapy standards framework. It all ties in that you bring these all together, because in the practice thresholds, it talks about being a reflective practitioner. Yes. So that's exactly part of that. And it's not always about our clinical situations. It's not always about Kiritaki we saw this morning with a particularly painful ankle. It can be some of the situations that we do find ourselves in, especially not picking on it for any particular reason, but especially around things like boundaries or when am I a physiotherapist and when am I just hanging out with the sports team. Yes. There's lots of situations that sit outside that traditional clinical scope.
Yes. And this sounds bad, but if something bad was to happen and so there's a complaint made about a physiotherapist, I would, and I don't know whether this is a little bit off topic, but I would never be tempted to go back and alter your notes to fit your narrative, ever.
No.
Seek support. Reflective writing, that's hugely important. Sorry, Damon, if I've taken you somewhere.
This is absolutely beautiful. This is great. So coming now probably to the process that's been happening recently, and this has been going on for, I think we've been working on it for about a year. And
a bit longer, I think.
Probably a bit longer it is actually. That the review involved a survey, it involved a working group, which yourself, myself, and representatives from Physiotherapy New Zealand and Taura Tinana, as well as all of the people who responded to the consultation. So there's been a lot that's gone into this, and there have been quite a number of changes that have come out of this, which I think is really exciting and makes it much more contemporary. One of the first ones that you and I talked about when the decision came through was around kiritaki versus patient. And this was one that I know was talked about. We talked about it a lot at lots of different levels, and it was consulted on. And knowing that the decision was really about the appropriate word for who we now see as physiotherapists, that we have really gone often beyond a traditional physiotherapy or physiotherapist patient relationship, and actually we can work in many different forms. So kiritaki involving and encapsulating all of those was probably the reason, just the most appropriate word for the term we needed.
Yes, it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because it's probably not a word we're necessarily familiar with. And to tell you the truth, I wasn't necessarily familiar with it at the beginning. But it's like anything, you learn, and it fits. It fits because of the reasons Damon has stated. Physiotherapy and the recipients of physiotherapy can vary widely, whether they have ill health or whether they are in rehabilitation or whether they are very well people who are just coming along to seek physiotherapy as preventative or and so on. So it does mean that we needed a word that encapsulated everything, and it is hard to find one. Actually, you think about patient, and sometimes I like the idea of the word patient because it means we have a responsibility to them, but that doesn't capture everybody either. And so consumer and client sounds a little bit contractual, and the exchange of money, and you get this and I get that, and so that seems a little bit too, I don't know, difficult as well. So yes, it was settled on, and this was a word that was well supported by our other members of our sort of working group.
Yeah. And it's like other words. If kiritaki is something that is new to you, and it is, there will be a few words which you may not recognise in the code, that they will be underlined and they'll be in the glossary. So there's a glossary section at the end, quite a comprehensive section that will explain some of the new terms that have come in or that are being used. So again, if you've read it before, have another look, because some of those terms may have changed. One of the other really easy changes that we've seen, but is always necessary, is updating relevant legislation. So we've gone through and updated to things like the privacy code, which has changed since the last review, as well as some other parts as well. I know that and this really talks to what we talked about right back at the beginning, which is physiotherapy, like everything, is evolving and moving at a pace and always changes. So kiritaki also is hopefully giving us some future as well, because we don't know who physiotherapists are going to be seeing in the next 5 or 10 years before the next review. So that's, again, looking to the future rather than just where we're at now. I know we had a discussion in the group about, for those who are looking at the changes around, we've gone from health records needing to be legible to having to be comprehensive and accessible. And again, just a reflection of our times, we're not necessarily, there's not a huge number of us, still a few, but still writing health records, that actually contemporizing the code really does bring it up to date with what we're doing, rather than sitting in the, legible really didn't seem like the appropriate word to be left there anymore, did it?
No, that's right. That's right. Although you can make things illegible if you use too many abbreviations. So yes, it's really important to make your notes accessible and easily understood. Yeah.
Yeah. And finally, I think on some of the changes before we get into the nitty gritty of it, is we have removed some points, and the board has removed some points for a number of reasons. Sometimes there's other relevant legislation that is already in place that is covering that particular area. And I think about some of the areas around advertising where maybe the Fair Trading Act is covering those particular areas. And so therefore the board doesn't necessarily have a place in policing those or setting the requirements for those. But also we reviewed and looked at other parts of the framework, and again, lovely working the framework together, that things like physiotherapists shouldn't be treating whānau family and those close to you. Well, there's a whole standard on that now, which covers that whole area much more comprehensively than the Code of Ethics. So it was really a decision around where's the most appropriate place, but also not sending people to 2 or 3 different places. It's hard enough to be coming to a huge framework without having to look to 2 to 3 places and find out where the bit is that you need.
Yeah. So one thing I would like to comment on is that the code fits in with all the legislation. So there's nothing within the code that is being asked of a physiotherapist that is not, that is in conflict with anything in the law. So we're very careful about that. And Damon will tell you that we've had legal support for the document. And so the law is not going to ask you to do something that the code is telling you not to, and vice versa. So that's centrally important. And also the code will be supportive of all the other standards and documentation of the board. So there'll be nothing in there that'll conflict again with what's being stated elsewhere.
And if you do find yourself in a situation where there is a perceived conflict between the framework and the law will always take precedence. It will always take will always override anyway. So looking at some of the interesting points that have come in, I'm looking at new principles, and I'm looking at particular in 4.2, and this was a point that was there was a lot of information gathering that's happened over the last year to 18 months, including the Physiotherapy Experiences Survey, which just talked about discrimination and in the workplace as well as in practice. And with the results of that, again, it was decided that physiotherapists, we needed to put some more protection in there. And so physiotherapists must not bully or harass or facilitate or enable bullying or harassment in a workplace or workplace-related setting. And a really lovely, a nice point to put in there. And I really liked the wording around or facilitate or enable. So we, as physiotherapists, if we're in positions of power, we can't simply say, it wasn't me who said it, so I'm not, so that's nothing to do with me, Governor. So I really like that particular point. And again, brought in by another piece of work by the Physiotherapy Experiences Survey.
And can I also say that meshes now with more recent legislation about bullying and harassment at the workplace. So, yeah, it fits nicely.
Yeah.
It's timely.
It is timely, and it is, again, it's acknowledging that it goes beyond the code simply goes beyond simply a physiotherapist kiritaki or patient relationship, that actually, as professionals, we have obligations to not only kiritaki but also those around us, and other parts which have been amended have also we've taken away parts which said we need to support less experienced colleagues, and just say we need to support colleagues, whether or not they're less experienced, whether or not we're all at the same level, but it talks about support of the profession rather than just those who are less experienced.
Mm-hmm.
One that I know that we have talked about prior to this actually was around students as well. And again, the addition of wording around physiotherapists need to be aware of and acknowledge the power imbalance that can happen with students. Is that something that has popped up for you in your work?
It's not excessively, although I do know that it is. Sometimes it's difficult to support the new generation of physiotherapy students coming through. They need support, and I think that if we can provide that kind of, training and support, that would be fantastic. I know it's not always possible, and so you wouldn't want to make it compulsory, because it is difficult out there, and but
Absolutely.
That we do have a bit of an obligation to help train our new staff, because these are the people that are going to take our places eventually, and it's also our future members of staff who are going to look out for the interests of kiritaki. And so we do, I think we should have an obligation to do that.
Yeah.
Mm.
Coming back to circling all the way back to using the code as a shield, which I love as a concept. 6.4 is a new point which says physiotherapists must ensure that their professional obligations and standards are not jeopardized by employment or contractual arrangements, relationships with industry or other arrangements. And I certainly can't take any credit for this being added in there, but to me, that's it's a two-parter, really. We simply can't sign away our rights, obligations and requirements as physiotherapists on a contract and say, well, I signed, my boss told me I have to. But at the same time, it's also a bit of as you said, a protection of showing it to someone who is trying to make you do things which you know aren't probably the best thing, and say, well, the board said I can't.
Yes. So can I give an example of that?
Love to. Yep.
So a prime example would be a relationship with a sports group where you are expected to deviate from clinical practice that you would normally undertake, and where perhaps the welfare of the athlete may be jeopardised by the actions being requested of you by the team management or the coach or whoever. So and then of course there's third parties, stakeholders such as that team's sponsor is a prime example, who may expect a certain famous person to be on the field or on the court, and yet full well that that they should be, there should be a stepwise rehabilitation program, and they want to shortcut that, and they want you to, say to the athlete, something that is untrue in order to get them back in a manner that suits the sponsor but doesn't suit the well-being of the athlete. These kind of things are really, really, it puts the physiotherapist in a really difficult position. So there's a prime example of why that might be useful, and why you might be able to say, actually, I can't do that, and I will not be able to sign a contract that asks me to deviate from expectations of confidentiality or, and so on.
And that speaks to the support you were talking about again earlier, that there is, for those of us who've, and lots of us who've been around, have had plenty of pressures from different sides. That pressure's real, and it's very big when it happens. But it may not happen all on a Monday. No. That sort of, you've worked with the team for a while. There's trust there between the, as sort of, we're talking about coaching team, management team, and it's just a slow grind where you start getting asked to do one thing, then another, that just starts to push those boundaries a little bit further until you hit that one. And as you said, having that support group of having you, whether it's your friends, your colleagues, to go, that doesn't sound right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the professional isolation makes that, I think, a real challenge. If you are dealing with this on your own, it's a really hard ask.
So one of the sports doctors that I interviewed as part of my own research talked about the time he was told through the earpiece to tell an athlete, a player who was on a team sport, to stop being a wimp and die for the cause. And that's just about a direct quote. And, all credit to this sports doctor who pretended that the microphone was broken and took it off so he couldn't hear the coach ranting in his ear. So, that's the kind of pressure that is real, and it takes a brave person to take that mic off and to pretend it was not working. Not that we advocate lying, but, getting through those difficult times, it's hard. I'm
so glad to hear someone else has used the broken radio mic as an excuse, because I've certainly done exactly the same thing as an inexperienced physiotherapist on the field, having that same thing happen and having someone yelling down my ear. And that's having knowledge of the code and having knowledge of, and I think that's the powerful thing about reading the code, having a look at it before these things happen, rather than a retrospective, jeepers, did I do the right thing? Yeah. Knowing that knowledge and knowing that the expectations and requirements are there before you start.
Yeah, but the thing is, you still might make a mistake.
Absolutely.
And if you do, this is where we're saying, seek support. Don't pretend otherwise. If you're unsure, seek support. Document the fact that you rang so-and-so and spoke to them about it. It's difficult to go through clinical practice without, maybe a complaint about us for whatever reason. And so you do need to think about what you might do if that happens to you.
Thanks, Lynley. I don't think anyone expects any of us to go through our careers and not make mistakes. It's a real part of it, and
we're human.
And that code, right back to the very first question, what is a code and why is it there? It brings us back to reality, really, of what should I have done, what was required of me, even though I didn't do it this time. And again, back into reflective practitioner, how would I change things next time? Sometimes we're not going to get it perfect the first time.
That's right.
In fact, none of us are going to go through our career getting everything perfect.
No, that's right.
So how do we do that, and how do we, and I think we keep talking about it, but support. The code is really important, as is the rest of the framework, but I think the support that surrounds us as practitioners and that we surround ourselves at is just as important, because we can't always do these things on our own.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right.
I'm just going to build on that, and I'm going to just build on the conversation you were having before about sports physios and sports teams, and some of those challenges you have with, and I'm just going to pick one example, with things like socializing with the team. In your experience, just from your experience, what can happen? What have you seen happen? And what would you say to physios?
To tell you the truth, I think it's a disaster waiting to happen for people. I think, there are examples abound about physiotherapists or any health professional going out drinking with the team. There is this kind of self-belief that, this is a good way of getting to know them. This is a good way to establish rapport. I have a good relationship with them, and so I'm part of the team, and so I should go out and drink with them. But it's so fraught. It is so fraught. We've heard about people getting into fights. And I'm talking about health professionals getting into fights. We've had people trying to carry out health procedures while intoxicated. We've had people, and even, the team members will expect the health professional to be that health professional when they are out drinking with that team. So it's such a problem, because it can mean that you do things you wouldn't normally do. And look, everybody, and if you're out socializing and something goes wrong, everybody's got a camera. And boy, can that come round back and cause some problems for you. So my advice would be, perhaps you go to the end of year dinner and you have a glass of wine. That's about it. And I do know that some of the doctors I've spoken to, and these are experienced people, they say that they don't drink anymore. Like, for example, they might be the doctor or the physio for the Commonwealth Games team or the Olympic team, and they don't drink at all from the start of when that first athlete turns up at the games to when the last athlete leaves, because it's just too problematic. And I've come to that conclusion myself, that I don't think this is a good idea. And I know I upset a lot of physios when I say that.
I know that, again, my experience too, that it's funny how you're physiotherapist at 2:00 in the morning when someone gets injured.
Exactly.
It's you've got a name until someone's injured, and then suddenly you become the physio again. So
yes.
Again, a really good topic to sit down and talk about as a group, about where do those boundaries lie, whether it's with sports, kapahaka, whether it's with dancing, whatever the group looks like.
Yeah, I only talk about sport because that's the one I know the most. But
and myself,
I would agree. It's so many different groups.
Yeah.
Mm.
So I think leaving that as a talking point, and if you are going to get your support groups together, that's a really good one to sit down and have a really good chat about where do those boundaries lie. What is expected? What have you done, and what might you do in the future? I think they're fantastic topics that can come out of the Code of Ethics as actual in-services. So I'd encourage you to, if you're stuck for in-services and you're sort of getting a bit bored of the same mobilisations or parts of the body to talk about, or joints and the like, then the Code of Ethics can be a really good place to start, and just grab one of those particular points and have a chat about it, and have a chat about how it relates to your particular setting, because it'll be different in your setting, whether you're private, whether you're public. So I think they make for great topics.
Absolutely.
Just before we wrap up, Lynley, is there anything else in terms of code, I suppose, application to practice that you think is important for physios in this day and age? I know I'm putting you on the spot, but I'm designed to do that.
The only thing I would just reiterate is it's really important to be familiar with the code, and there will be a time between one code to the next where people won't be as familiar as they might be. I think that we need to think that we need to get onto it pretty smartly. Actually, there might be a bit of a grace period where, we're trying to educate people about the code. But there comes a time when you really have to be familiar with the code and know, and if it feels like, something that is common sense, great. That's great. I'm pleased to hear that. I don't worry about that, because that means that you're probably going to practice within an ethical standard. So that would be, I haven't got too much more to add to that.
No, that's perfect. Thank you. So for those of you who are aware and those who are watching today, there are some changes coming up. They become effective on the 1st of April of 2026. So that's the latest iteration of the Code of Ethics and Professional Conduct. We have some resources on the board's website under education. If you just follow through education, physiotherapy standards framework, there will be a section on the Code of Ethics and Professional Conduct. Keep your eye out on your email over the next few weeks. But Professor Lynley Anderson, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you, and we close today with karakia so we can return to our busy lives. Kia whakaeria te tapu, kia wātia atiara. Kia tūruki whakataha ai, kia tūruki whakataha ai. Haumi e, hui e, tai ki e. Kia ora, everybody.
This has been a Physiotherapy Board Te Poari Tiaki Tinana podcast. It was recorded on Thursday the 19th of March 2026 and featured Board Chief Professional Advisor Damon Newrick in conversation with Professor Lynley Anderson, who specialises in bioethics and healthcare education and was the lead author for the review of the Code of Ethics and Professional Conduct, which comes into force on the 1st of April 2026. As always, if you want to share your thoughts about this podcast with us, you can email us at physio@physioboard.org.nz. Kia ora.